Stuart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'm going to be continuing my series on Bobby Fischer and Garry Kasparov's responses in the Sicilian Najdorf system. And so I'm going to be opening things up right here. We're going to look at the English attack, and this is definitely one of the most dangerous lines that you can play, that you can come across in the Sicilian Najdorf. And it really became popular in the 80s. A couple of English grandmasters, specifically, I think Nunn, Chandler, Murray. I mean, they did definitely some good work on this line. And even before them, you know, in Fischer's time, Robert Byrne was really the go-to man. You know, he was very responsible for developing and laying the foundation of the opening theory in the English attack. So I do want to make it very clear, Garry Kasparov frequently employed this line with knight g4, and so this is definitely a good line. You know, Kasparov employed it at the top for a good number of years, but I've chosen to stay away from it in this series, similar to the poison pawn variation in the bishop g5 line. I've chosen to stay away from it because it's really a different system. It's very complicated, and it requires a lot of research. That's not, you know, some of the ideas overlap with the Najdorf, but many of them don't. So anyway, Kasparov, in this game, Judith Polgar is playing white. We have Kasparov as black. This was in the World Cup of Rapid Chess in Cannes 2001. And so Kasparov here, he actually plays e6. So you might be thinking, wait a second, this isn't the Najdorf. I thought that was e5. And e6, you know, I guess this is technically the Shevenigan, but honestly, the ideas overlap so much with the Najdorf, and Kasparov employed this system so much against the bishop e3 line that I think it's quite fair to use it here. So e5, we're going to look at that a little bit later, and this can lead, you know, just to give you an idea, the English attack, this is kind of a main line, you could say. You know, a mainline type position, mainline structure and whatnot in the English attack. So instead, Kasparov with e6, I really like his setup in this game. It was really cool. So he plays b5 here. This is what Kasparov and also Fischer primarily employed against the 6 bishop c4, the Fischer-Sozin attack. And so with b5, black is really immediately playing on the queen side. And having played e6, he doesn't have to worry so much about white trying to undermine that, as it's going to be easier, you know, let's say something like this, for black to play something like d5. And so you can see black has got excellent space here, a very comfortable game. So, you know, b5, now g4. So Judith Polgar was a very scary attacking player. Now I know her record against Kasparov is not very good, something like 13-1 or something, a few draws mixed in there, but she's a very aggressive player, and with g4, you know, she's trying to bring the pain. She's ready. She's ready to rumble. So Kasparov here, he plays this knight b6 move, and I've really noticed this in a lot of his games. How he is he really liked to maneuver his knights to the queenside squares. You know, b6 and c5. He really liked to do that, and it's not that he just liked it. He was extremely successful with it. And so in this game, I think it's really clear he plays knight fb7 here. And so you might be thinking, you know, what kind of freak show is this? What's going on with these knights? He's moved only his knights in 10 moves. He's moved each knight twice and a couple of pawns. So not your average opening, but the idea is a mixture of prophylaxis and aggression. Because on the one hand, you're not allowing g5 to come with tempo, which is a move that white will almost surely play in this line. It's very, you know, it's not guaranteed, but it's almost. And also, by moving the knight over here, you're rerouting all of your pieces to the queen side where you want to attack as black. So in the English attack, you know, this is one of those really fast-paced lines in the Najdorf. And so you don't want to get caught up trying to defend your own king. You want to have your primary focus on counterattacking on the queen side, you know, maneuvering your pieces towards the queen side and playing in the center. And so with this knight, this early knight maneuver, it's kind of like white is really left with nothing to attack. It's like black doesn't have any weaknesses. You know, he doesn't play any moves like h6 to give something, you know, white something to latch onto. And, you know, g5, it no longer comes with attacking with a tempo. And so it's such a weird system, a mix of prophylaxis and aggression. But I really like it. I think Kasparov, this was a really cool idea. And so here, bishop b7. I should mention bishop e7. Big mistake. Let this bishop get chopped. That would be not good for black. So bishop b7 first. Now bishop d7. And we can feel the potential energy for black in this position. Is he going to play d5? Is he going to play e5? You could even try to fianchetto and attack on this diagonal. So black has so many options, and with rook c8 here, Kasparov is ready to throw down. This is very picturesque. White has got all her pieces very well coordinated, consolidated in the center, and black is simply playing everything he can towards the queen side. And I think I've actually seen some games here where Kasparov immediately sacrificed the exchange and just dominated, just completely dominated. Like knight a4, the knights came in and went crazy, can play d5, opening up this bishop here. So that's a real line. And I've seen some very impressive results. So Polgar, she doesn't want any piece of that. She plays knight c2, and I think that's a good call. Not letting black sacrifice when all of his pieces are ready to jam on the queen side, I think it's a good call. And so knight c5, so Kasparov again, the knights are just going nuts. And so hopping in, so many knight moves in the first 15 moves, but very effective. And so now with b3, okay, Kasparov says, all right, this is enough. Let's trade a pair of knights. And he maintains this one here. So now knight to g3. So Polgar goes on a little knight tour of her own, brings the knight over here where it's going to be helping out the center. Maybe you can even swing to h5 and put some pressure on black there. So bishop to e7. So I think bishop e7 was a nice touch because it stops g5 and also for the moment is preventing h4 just with this battery here on this diagonal. So it's a good time to develop. Polgar, she responds immediately. Queen to b2, a nice move, kind of protecting the king, hitting this diagonal from far away. And so b4, Kasparov's trying to jam with the queenside attack, and knight h5. So Polgar put a little knight tour of her own together to e2, to g3, to h5. Very nice, very good maneuver, especially combined with queen b2. So Kasparov plays rook g8, definitely a clumsy move in this position, but I guess he had to do it. And so now g6. So he kicks the knight back. Enough of that. And so a5. So here, black has got, I think, a very comfortable position. His rook is very misplaced. There's no denying that. But all of his other pieces are doing great. And white has a very tough time playing h4. Black can just take it here. So a very interesting game. So d4 and forcing black back, and now d5. And this. Maybe I was a little critical of this move when I was studying the game. d5, maybe it's just a little too fast. It's just a little too fast. I would have preferred rook c1, trying to exploit the fact that black's rook on g8 is unable to connect with his rook here. So I think a move like rook to c1 here, I like that more. Preserve the integrity of the center pawns. Look how many, they're controlling so many squares. This is great. And with rook c1, even if black tries to, continue pushing for the attack on the a file, maybe now you could even switch your energy, to something like this, or I suppose it would also be possible to try to double on the c file. Instead with d5, why I don't like it is it just gives black too many squares. Now black plays e5, seems to be a forced response, and so now bishop a6. So Kasparov immediately improves the position of his bishop. And now he's getting ready to play knight to c5. So he's going to get pretty good activity out of this. Bishop f6. In case white plays f4, the bishop will be on a nice diagonal. And also, kind of weird in this position, oddly enough, black's king is going to be very safe on e7 in the middle of the storm. Just kind of a closed position here. So now black, Kasparov king e7, so pretty goofy game here. Polgar, she obviously wants to bust open the center and go after black's king. And so Kasparov actually, he's got to take the pawn. If he doesn't, whatever move he makes, it could be any move. It really doesn't matter. Let's say a4 for for argument's sake, f5 is white's idea, and she's going to have way too much play with those pawns. So instead, Kasparov exchanges, queen b6, queen a6, very nice maneuver, just taking some squares, and so now knight e5. So while Kasparov's king is very exposed in the center, he does have an extremely well-placed knight. He's got good pressure on this diagonal for the time being, and maybe something will happen on the diagonal towards white's king in the future. So I think black has got the better prospects here because it's very difficult for white to open up another line of attack. And so here, Kasparov just bishop d7. He wants to keep the bishop, and I don't blame him. Now the bishop, instead of this diagonal, is going to reroute and possibly attack from the other side. So just a thought. So here, Kasparov exchanges, wants to reduce the tension with the rooks in the position. I don't blame him. Finally activate that rook on g8. And so now after a couple more exchanges here, bishop takes, Polgar played knight c6, and this was just a mistake. I don't blame her for missing Kasparov's follow-up. It's very difficult in this position. Maybe queen d1 is the only move, trying to just guard all of this queen's entry squares while defending the knight. But even here, it just doesn't seem very fun to play. Not at all. Bishop takes, and maybe even just go straight with the check. You can try to defend this. It's not going to be fun. The problem is moves like queen g2. And if black snatches this pawn, or any of these pawns fall, black is going to have a great game. So I think Polgar, a miscalculation with knight c6, Kasparov takes it, and he plays queen to e2. And as I said, I don't blame her for missing this. This is a weird move. This is an easy move to miss. And the point is that this bishop is a monster. It's going to be able to win one of these pawns if we go to an endgame. And in the game, after c7, this was Kasparov's idea. Just go ahead and take the knight. And if this happens, black is just up a pawn in this endgame. It should be winning for black, no doubt. And instead, in the game, he took. Polgar made a queen here. And after a couple of checks, Kasparov wins this pawn. The g5 pawn is going to fall as well, and just going to march the pawns down the board. So Polgar fought on for a minute. Kasparov throws a couple of nice checks in, just picking off a few pawns, and consolidates with queen e5. And Judith Polgar resigned because she's down like 3 pawns. So just taking a quick look, let's go back to the beginning. Where did this all happen? e6. Kasparov plays an interesting idea with e6, and I should definitely mention g4 it's been seen here, although maybe after e5 this stuff gets really complicated. But I think actually had a recent game in this. I think black is okay. Something like here, and you play f4, the bishop goes somewhere, and you want to make sure to play bishop e6 to not let white develop. Just a sideline. So anyway, the e6 move, f3, English attack, b5, and this is, Kasparov's, one of his signature plans in the Sicilian, especially against the English attack, just moving all of his knights to the queenside. And I'm telling you, if rook here, this sacrifice is deadly. Very difficult for white to recover. d5 is just too easy. Just opens up. Queen coming to a5. Even the other knights come into the attack. Black's going to have a very good game. So I think in this position we can safely say black has achieved a comfortable position out of the opening. So moving on, I'm going to take a look at a game from the Manhattan Blitz tournament in 1971. And this was kind of the pioneer. I don't believe he originally invented the system, but he definitely did a lot of work on it to make it popular in its beginning development. Grandmaster Robert Byrne with white, and this is against Bobby Fischer. And so Byrne and Fischer, they knocked heads, and then Fischer, we all know what happened. He ended up beating Byrne and becoming the U.S. champion a dozen times or so. And so, Byrne, in this game, it was 1971, opening theory was not in its infancy, but it was still developing quite a lot. Kasparov's book, Revolution in the 70s, absolute must-buy, for example. But, so Byrne, he's really doing a lot of work on this line at this time to make it a real system, a widely accepted system. So with F3, and we can see here Fischer is playing a standard Najdorf response with bishop e7 and castles, very flexible move order. But, I think it's maybe a little too crazy in this line. As not too crazy, I just think it plays into White's hand. With G4, White wants to attack over here, and I think Black is kind of letting it. So with B5, Fischer is getting counterplay here, but now the knight is kind of stuck on the edge of the board on H5. So really the drawback with the knight being on H5 is that it's given up control of the D5 square. But, we can see Black still has a lot of resources in this line, so you never want to panic against the English attack, even though it's a very aggressive system. These pawn storms coming at you on the king side, they look a little scary, but you never want to panic. And in the English attack, you got to focus on your own counterplay on the queen side here. So Fischer, with rook c8, bishop h3 was a nice move, pinning that knight to the rook. And so now knight a5, Byrne really starts taking him apart. So I think this knight b8, is not looking so great for Black. Now bishop to g4, and Fischer brings the knight to f4. So, Black does have resources. The knight on f4 is an excellent piece. This pawn is very weak right now, and so that's why h4, now f5. Fischer fights for activity, and after bishop b6, he sacrifices the exchange. And now he's I think Black in this position honestly has sufficient activity for the exchange. So White plays knight c6. Good move. Lift the rook. Try to come to c7 to surround that pawn. And so now Byrne takes. And I think in this position, we can safely say Black has got equality. I think so. It's not going to be the easiest game in the world. But really, it shouldn't be that difficult. The knight is attacking this pawn is so weak. Maybe in the future, the bishop is attacking h4 is weak. And White's light-squared bishop, it can get to e6, but not much farther. So it doesn't exactly have a lot of prospects in the position. So I think, White, Black has got equality here. Maybe he can play e4 someday and open up his own bishop as well. So just looking at the opening, and, Fischer was still developing his response to this new system. And I think my personal choice would be Kasparov's line with the immediate bishop e6. Usually see f3, d2, and now b5. This is another line that Kasparov had played with the e5 move. And after moves like g4, just bail out with the knights, no problem. Kasparov also did play lines with h6, but this is the line that really stands out to me, is just structuring all of his position towards achieving active counterplay and threats on the queen side and hopefully in the center as well. So that's going to do it for this this opening. Looking at Bobby Fischer and Kasparov's response to the English attack. One of the more dangerous lines. That's definitely for sure here for White. And this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net. Thanks for tuning in.